Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. If you're watching this live, let me know in the chat if you can hear me, if you can see me, if everything is working. I did have a bunch of technical issues just now, so please confirm that all is well. So yeah, welcome to the webinar. Today we're talking about the main ways to get rejected for the Global Talent Visa. Basically, the point of this is to talk about the most common issues that I see with applications for the Tech Nation endorsement, and we'll talk about the ways how you can avoid those mistakes and how you can generally improve your chances for endorsement. So if you're new here, first of all, welcome. Glad to see you join the webinar, and glad to see you join my YouTube channel. I'm Nadia. I'm a UK Global Talent Visa recipient coach. I myself got endorsed for this visa in 2022 as a software engineer, and since then I've been helping people get endorsed. So far, I think I probably crossed the 500 clients, or will be crossing this number soon. So these are the people that I've consulted on the visa. Obviously, it's not all the people that got the visa, but these are the people who had consultations with me. And if we think about what kind of jobs they were doing or are doing, it's really broad selection. I would say most of my clients have been software engineers, but also I have helped or consulted a lot of designers, product managers, founders of startups, heads of business departments, data analysts, QA engineers, sales professionals, marketers, and a lot of different specialties that are not on this list, but people that I have helped. So my next slide is questions for you. If you could let me know in the comments here in chat if you're planning to apply for the visa next year, or maybe you're still trying to apply in December. There is still time. And if you could let us know in the chat, what is your current job? So will you be applying as a software engineer, as a designer, as a product manager, or somebody else? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, I'm still waiting for somebody to type in whether you can hear me all right, see me. Let me know. All right, so let's start with the mistakes. These are, okay, so I got the comment that I can hear you pretty well. So yeah, I wonder what pretty well means. Let me check my audio if this is the right microphone. Yeah, it's the right microphone, so should be all right. Okay, thank you for confirming. So yeah, let me know in the comments also what your specialty is and when you're planning to apply, where you're based. So just a little bit about yourself so that I know who's listening to this and who's watching this. And also feel free to write your questions in the chat, to write your comments, and I'll try to answer questions during the webinar as well. So what is this webinar based on, and where is this information coming from? So it's really different sources, and I would say all of the sources, they point to the same things, to the same rejection reasons. So I get a lot of people who email me or message me on LinkedIn with their rejections, who recently got rejected. So I get to see their performance or their rejection reasons and analyze them. I also follow Telegram chats and forums where people share their rejection reasons. So this is based on a wide selection of sources. And I think it's really important to be realistic about the rejection reasons when you're applying, and not just, I mean, positive thinking is important, of course, but it's really important to also understand that there are things that will get you rejected or will significantly increase the chances for your rejection. So a big reason actually when people get rejected, for people getting rejected, and also just to clarify, it's not really enough to like make one mistake like this to get rejected. Usually there are a bunch of reasons, there are a bunch of issues with the application that cause people to get rejected. And I'll just highlight the most common things that are mentioned in the application. But really, I think it's sort of like a death by 1,000 cuts, where you can make some mistakes and still get endorsed. But if you make too many of them, or if you make some crucial mistakes, then the likelihood of everything going downhill is really high. I think it's really easy to mess up an application with asking wrong people to write you letters of recommendation. So who are, wrong people, or like who are the right people to ask? It's a good question. I would say my rule of thumb is to ask myself, would this person who is writing the letter of recommendation be able to get endorsed for the Global Talent Visa on their own? And run this check for the people you're asking to help you with your letters of recommendation. They should be experts in digital technology. Obviously, they should have an established public profile. They should have name recognition in the space. They should have contributions assigned to their name. So it can be research, peer-reviewed research. It can be conference talks, open source, some major business successes, or depending awards, depending on the field, it will be different. But basically, those people should be, usually they are well known in your niche, in your space. I don't think that all of them have to be world famous or anything like that, but they have to be significant people in the space. So besides that, they obviously should also be familiar with your work. There is the 12-month rule in the Tech Nation guide. It means that the person writing your letter of recommendation should be familiar with your work in detail for at least a year. This is a very crucial rule, and the letter should explain how this person knows you and how they, like, where is this coming from? How would they have this information, basically? So this should be explained in the letter, and it should be really clear. Sometimes I see this mentioned in the letters of recommendation that it's not clear, how does this person even know this? Another thing is that this expert cannot be your direct manager or colleague or friend. So there should be some degree of separation between you and the expert. So there should be no conflict of interest in this way. And in general, this person should be enough of an authority to be actually writing about you. And also the person needs to be strong, but also the content needs to be strong, because very often the letters get rejected because they are very vague. They are generic. They don't really talk about things specific to your experience. And this is where the importance of the expert knowing you comes in. Because as you can imagine, if the expert doesn't know you, there is no way for them to talk about you in a non-generic way, right? And a generic letter usually gets rejected quite easily. There's also an issue with AI-generated letters. This is explicitly forbidden, but obviously people still try to do it. They still try to trick the system to kind of win this game in this clever way. However, it doesn't really work. It's usually very easy to spot letters that are AI generated, and it's easy to see that they are all the same, right? So the letters cannot be templated, right? So they cannot be kind of following the same structure, the same tone of voice, the same phrases, the same ideas, or the same stories, right? So it's really important that the letters are authentic, that they are personalized, that they come from real experts, and they are written by humans, and they read like this. So this is really important. And I'm seeing a lot more rejections because the letters just don't feel authentic. And once you've seen enough rejections and enough rejected cases, you kind of get a sense for what a generic letter looks like. And as you can imagine, the assessors read so many cases, and I think after a while they all start to sound the same. So if your case is just the same as everybody else's, then the question is, what's the point, right? Like, what is the point of this application if it's just the same as everybody else? The letters need to stand out, and they need to be non-generic. Really important. I know I'm repeating myself, but I see this so often that I think it bears repeating, actually. Another important part about letters is the signatures. The thing with signatures used to be, the approach to signatures used to be much more flexible. So there were different ways to sign letters for your experts, and like it was very relaxed in terms of the acceptable ways. So I still saw people like getting rejected with comments about their letters being like weirdly signed, because sometimes people would just copy paste a signature of an expert from somewhere and just insert this image into the letter, which looked obviously fake. So that never really worked. However, nowadays it's so much stricter that I think it's really important that you just follow the guidance exactly the way it is written in the technician guide. So there are two acceptable ways. So the first one is for your expert to print out the letter on paper, sign it with ink with their hand, scan it, and send it back to you. That's first. Second is for them to upload the letter to a tool like DocuSign, sign it, send it over to you with the full confirmation receipt and the logs that are generated. Basically, the logs will show the IP addresses of the originator, the signer. And this will make it clear to the assessors who actually uploaded the letter, who signed it, and the logs, they also need to be attached to the letters. So I hope this makes sense and this is clear. If you have any questions about the signatures or letters in general, ask them in comments. I know it's a big issue for people usually to figure out how to do it properly. So this is your opportunity to ask questions. Okay, I see some comments. So we have a data architect based in the UK joining. Great. So yeah, who else is watching? I see more people. So yeah, let us know in the comments. So another reason is actually pretty big. This is relying on consulting and service experience versus product experience. It's still an issue for people who confuse product companies versus consultancy companies, and they try to use their consulting experience for the criteria that demand product experience. There is really no place in the application for consulting or freelance work. You have to focus on product work. If you are confused whether your company is consulting or product, usually it is consulting if a person is confused. So what is the definition of product company? It's a company where the company basically produces a software product. It owns the IP to this product, and then it sells it to customers. And most of its revenue comes from selling its own products. So this is a product company, and consulting companies, they typically build products for other companies, and then they give them over with the intellectual property rights to the client, right? And then that client company usually sells it to end customers. So here, I think I suggest that you take a moment to think about your current job or your previous jobs that you are thinking of using for the application, and try to honestly evaluate what your company is. People here try to also be clever and present their consulting companies as products, and they say that it's a consulting company, but it builds products as well. So it doesn't usually fly, and your company, like your previous companies, if you're using them, they will be analyzed and they will be checked. So here I just recommend being truthful, as with everything else, and pick the product experiences that you have as a foundation for your application. Again, if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. I will answer them live. A big one for the mandatory criteria is not having external proof of leadership. So here, this is a common rejection reasons for over a year, maybe 2 years. This is number one reason, and this is probably where most of the people who get rejected, like it's the core issue. People are applying for the visa with their mandatory criteria consisting of work projects. So they have their job projects, they have their employment history, their salary, and like other evidences like this. But that's not what the criteria is about. Like, yes, you can use those things in the mandatory criteria, but they are not enough. You really need to show industry recognition. So you need to show things like publications, public speaking at leading events. You need to show media recognition. You need to show awards, and I'll talk about those evidences in a bit. But I do hope that this takeaway is something that you take with you from this, is that you have to have external proofs of your leadership. It's not enough to just have work projects. Even if you work in a big company and it's really impactful and it has big impact on the industry, usually it's not enough. Sometimes you would hear a story, somebody on chats or forums, somebody who got endorsed without any external recognition of their work. But I don't personally see cases like this. I usually see cases of people who get rejected because they only use their work projects, and it applies to people who work at companies like Google, Apple, and Meta. So people with really big external impact through their work, usually they get rejected because you have to show industry recognition, not just your internal work recognition. Here, people often try to use awards to meet mandatory. This used to be much more flexible in the past. It seemed like pretty much any award would do here. So people used awards that weren't very selective or prestigious. Nowadays, this doesn't work. Technician will check how many people got nominated for this award or got awarded this award. And if this is if there is a high volume of people who receive it, so if it's not very selective, this will be an issue as well. So make sure that you're only using selective and actually prestigious awards. For media recognition, which is interviews, profiles, quotes of you, or like podcasts, this has to be in tech-focused publications. So this cannot be just generic publications, which used to be more acceptable in the past. So a bunch of people used, just like generic newspaper articles as proof. Here, it's very important that the publication itself is tech-focused. Also, it does have to be prestigious as well. So it needs to be something that looks serious and is regarded as a leading tech publication. So this is very important if you're considering using media recognition of yourself for mandatory. I do think it's a really great kind of evidence, but it needs to be focused, right? And I don't have a slide about this, but actually for public speaking, if you're using public speaking, it also has to be a leading technology event. So it has to be a conference with at least 100 people listening to your talk, and the talk needs to be your own talk. It cannot be a workshop or panel discussion. I mean, you can use those evidences as part of your application, but they don't replace the actually prestigious evidence of you speaking, being a keynote speaker at a conference. So also very important, like all of the evidences in mandatory, they have to be very, very high quality at this stage. So moving on, for innovation criteria, a big reason why people get rejected these days is not having external proof of innovation. I would say this has been true for a while. It's just becoming harder and harder to get awarded for innovation. So like sure thing for this criteria is actually having a patent registered in your name. So if you have a patent or a bunch of them, they have to be published actually, not pending. I mean, granted, right? So you can use them and potentially get awarded this criteria. Other things that work, like other external proofs of a thing being innovative, for instance, an article in leading tech publication explaining why your product is innovative, your startup is innovative. So that kind of evidence can also work. So with this criteria, make sure that you don't just focus on letters that are describing your product as innovative, but you are using actual objective external proof. Super important for this one. For OC2, I would say a big reason for getting rejected is not showing impact for your volunteer contributions or your mentoring or your community work or teaching or anything like that. So it has to have impact, and you have to be able to describe it with numbers. It can be challenging, I'm not going to lie, but if you have, let's say, if you have structured mentorship activities, for instance, that you do with groups, like a boot camp, for instance, I think that makes it easier to quantify your impact because you can track certain metrics, like how many students take your course, how many people graduate, and how many of them, let's say, find jobs in tech. This way you can show impact. If you are, writing, let's say, books, technical books, and publishing them, you can show how many people are reading them, quoting them, referencing them, or maybe if you're using open source evidences here, you can show how many people are using your code to build their own products or their own apps or libraries. So those things can be somewhat quantified, and I think you really should focus on the impact and trying to describe it, as much as you can. With the mentorship, I think this deserves a special separate slide because people still try to use evidences like ADP List and other online mentorship programs for this criteria. It doesn't work. It hasn't really worked for a while, but people are still trying. I don't know how else to say it, but the mentorship, it has to be structured. It has to have a selection process for mentors and mentees. And it's really strict. The requirements are very strict. So most likely your ad hoc mentorship sessions with a few people here and there, they won't work for this criteria. So they won't be enough. And if you're applying for OC2, you need to have stronger evidences than that. Because I think most people have some kind of mentorship that they've done, and they assume that it will be enough. But to be honest, it usually isn't. So make sure that you have some other evidences for OC2 and make sure that they have a quantifiable impact on the field of tech. All right, so moving on to OC3, the third optional criteria. Here, it used to feel like the easiest criteria to meet. Nowadays, there are also a lot of ways to get rejected for it, unfortunately. I would say everything is becoming harder, like every criteria is getting more and more selective. So with OC3, the big thing is only using letters as your evidence or self-written documents. So what a lot of people do is they would apply with only stuff that they've written themselves, like big essays or case studies, which is like 3 pages of text, sometimes some images inside this text, but very often it's just very long and very like detailed product description or project description. Sometimes people would have some screenshots of code. That's not really enough. Ideally you have to show industry impact. You have to show external proofs. You have to show publications or some other way to prove that this had impact on the industry. At the very least, it's very important to show like proof that you have actually led the project and you have actually been essential to it. This is connected to this reason where people would sometimes talk about some big initiatives at a big company where they would be like, this is the product that we launched and the company got acquired because of it, and it's a huge company. So it's really hard to see how this person's personal work had a direct connection to the result. And very often technician says, oh, we just see team effort. We don't see how this is related to you. So it's really important to make it clear that your letters, your reference letters, letters of recommendation, they make it clear that you were the leader of this product, project, initiative, that the success was directly linked to your leadership, and also to provide proof that you have actually done the work. So this can be some proofs of commits from GitHub or other tool. It can be screenshots from internal tools like Jira showing your leadership, that you've actually been leading this project, initiative thing. And it should be obvious from the documents that this is thanks to you and not just team effort. So hope this makes sense. Again, if it's not clear, make sure that you can ask questions in the comments. Don't be shy. I don't see any questions yet. So don't wait until the end. I think it's a good time to ask questions now as you're listening to this, as you are engaging with the slides. I think a big issue also with documents is, in general, often when people apply, they don't have a consistent story. So things in their application just don't really connect to each other. They don't quite make sense. So sometimes, like, I think usually it's just an honest mistake, and it's not people trying to confuse the assessor or like hide some truths, although sometimes it also happens. I think sometimes it's just confusion and being overwhelmed with the preparation process. So here it really helps to have somebody maybe read your application and tell you if everything makes sense, if everything is connected. Technician assessors, they will cross-reference things. They will check the dates in your jobs, in your projects, in your like startup experiences. They will see that, they will check that the dates in your CV align and they match. And then like the whole story, like from the letters and your own personal statement, that everything should be connected and aligned with each other. So not having that consistency sometimes can cause the assessor to think that you're trying to hide things or lie to them or confuse them, and they really don't like that. So here it's really important to have a consistent and simple and clear story narrative that starts from your personal statement, goes to the CV, and kind of goes through the rest of the document. So super important: consistency, accuracy, truth, important for the success of your case. This is a big one that I feel like people are very confused about, and I think there is a lot of misinformation out there from how to say, helpers in the space, people who help applicants get, prepare their applications for endorsement, where people are being told that you can work on your public profile and you can sort of make those things happen relatively quickly, that you can take a few months to have some conference talks, to do some mentorship, to get some articles published, and that they can, get them done very quickly and then get endorsed. And that's like a service that is being offered. And I think it's just kind of common misinformation floating around on forums as well, that those things can be done quickly and that it works. So this is not the case. It doesn't work. This approach isn't efficient. Very often, if the assessor sees that the evidences are all clustered within the last year, so basically, if we look at the timestamps for your external evidences, like your publications, your media mentions, and all of those things, if they're all clustered in the last year, for sure, if it's just the last 6 months, year is also common. Obviously, this depends on how long you've been in technology, right? So if you've been in tech for 15 years and you've never done anything except for your job, and then the last year, all of a sudden, like all of the stuff appears, obviously this looks suspicious to the assessor, right? Who can blame them? So that's a common rejection reasons. For other people who are like early in tech, sometimes, it's everything they've done appears within the last 6 months. Sometimes people apply with really fresh evidences, like they just do like 3 podcasts in 1 month and they apply, and that's the only thing they have in their profile that is external. That doesn't really work, and you should be realistic about it. If you go to any forums like Tech Nation Visa Forum, you will see a bunch of rejections mentioning this. So it's really important that all of your public stuff is consistently spread out in time over a long period of time, showing that you have done those things for a while, you have been doing them for a while, and showing that this is an authentic part of your personal brand rather than something kind of hastily done last minute to get the endorsement, right? So this is super important. I do worry that this information is not very well known, and a lot of people waste time and money trying to apply with evidences that will not get endorsed, and it's clear why. So this actually aligns with one of the previous slides, not having a consistent story, right? So, wow, I actually do have the same slide twice. Amazing. Yeah, so yeah, not having a consistent story is a big enough issue to warrant 2 slides. I think people sometimes try to get too clever with their application and they are just trying to do too many things, especially if your career history is sort of non-conventional. If you've done a lot of things, maybe you've switched professions, industries, this is where it's really important to have something that just makes sense and is easy to follow, because we want the assessor to understand what you're trying to say and not be confused, because confusion makes people feel bad about themselves, and people don't like to feel bad about themselves. So it's very easy for them to assume that something fishy is going on, that you're trying to hide some information, or something like that. So you really are, you don't want to have that. So these were the main reasons people get rejected. I try to really focus on the core issues. I mean, there are other things as well, maybe less important, less common, but this is something that if you really avoid those things, I think you can stay, you will be in a better position than most of the candidates who apply on their own. Unfortunately, people who apply with coaches or lawyers sometimes also make those mistakes. So just be aware. So now this is a good time for you to ask questions, right? So I'll be sort of doing the sales part of the webinar, and then I'll go through your questions. So good chance to ask them live and they'll answer them. So in terms of like how I can help you with your endorsements, there are different ways. So obviously you're watching this on YouTube, so you can learn a lot from YouTube, from the interviews that I've done with my clients and with other people in the space who have gotten the visa. You can also get my premium course, which is on my website. It's actually here. So it's bitlhub.com/course. It's a very affordable resource. I've actually made it 50% cheaper. Recently, I've updated it in October to make sure that it covers all the latest changes. So you can check it out and use it as a self-guided resource. And then obviously there is the one-on-one coaching with me where I can help you check your application, assess your chances, and also help you with a rejection if you get rejected. So if you need help with any of those things, you can contact me on LinkedIn or email me. I think that email is the safest way or like the surest way to reach me. And we can discuss, the options of how I can help you with your endorsement. So yeah, okay. So yeah, let me check the chat now and see if we have any questions live. Okay, we got a question here. Let me just read it. Only being product development leader is enough for software developer or required patents publication. So I do recommend that you check out the technician visa guide, which is the kind of foundational document about what is required to get endorsed. So typically your work projects or your software development leadership at work is enough to meet the third criteria and partially to meet the mandatory criteria, but usually it's not enough to meet all of the criteria. So as you can imagine, if you're going for the innovation criteria, OC1, usually you have to have patents. If you're going for the OC2, which was the kind of volunteer criteria, you need volunteering or publications. And for mandatory, you do need proof of leadership. So if you'd like to learn more, you can see my previous webinars. It's also here on YouTube. So if you go to the live tab, you can see a webinar that I've done, which was an hour and a half. It's a free webinar about how to get the visa, and it goes through the criteria and the requirements. So this webinar is kind of a shorter one, just focused on the rejection reasons. However, if you haven't researched the requirements or the criteria in detail, I recommend checking it out. You can learn a lot about the the expectations and like all of this kind of foundational requirements there. So it's a good place to start. All right, so yeah, I don't think we have any more questions. I think we've covered pretty much the main reasons for rejections. Let me just scroll and think if I can think of anything else that I haven't covered. Yeah, I think the biggest change that I'm seeing now is the assessors, they will analyze your evidences as if it's like an actual investigation, right? So things will be cross-checked, cross-referenced, and you need to make sure that everything is very, very consistent, that you really take care with the signatures, with the authenticity of documents, with following the rules in terms of the page limit, the 3-page rule, really important. What else? The translations. You should not submit any evidences that have text that is not in English. So you have authorized translations for all of that kind of content. And yeah, I think that's it. I think that's pretty much it. That pretty much covers it. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you need any help, you can contact me by this email. You can leave a comment underneath this video. If you have more questions, I can answer them asynchronously. Thank you so much for watching this. Thank you much for joining. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.